The midnight blue sedan shouldn't have been in the driveway at all. Lee Sang-jae had texted his wife 3 hours ago that he'd be in Manhattan until dawn, closing a deal that would legitimize half his empire. But the ledgers didn't balance, and men who ignored bad math in his line of work ended up in the Hudson. So he came home, to the Westchester estate that looked like old money but smelled like fresh blood, to the wife who kissed him goodbye this morning with lips that tasted like lies. The house was too quiet. Not the comfortable silence of wealth, but the held breath quiet of a secret being kept. He killed the engine and sat in the December cold, watching the windows of his own home like a stranger. That's when he saw the shadow move across the master bedroom curtains. 2 shadows. One he recognized by the way she moved, fluid and deliberate. His wife, So-yeon. The other was broader, male, and when the curtain shifted, Sang-jae saw enough. The shape of a man's hand against his wife's waist. The tilt of her head, intimate and unguarded in a way she hadn't been with him in over a year. His hand moved to his hip, muscle memory reaching for the cold weight of his gun. He'd killed men for far less than this, but before his fingers found metal, another hand found his wrist. Small, trembling, insistent. He spun, ready to snap bones, and found himself staring into the terrified eyes of Deborah Horton, the maid, the quiet black woman his wife hired 6 months ago, the one who moved through his house like smoke, never speaking unless spoken to, never looking him in the eye, except she was looking at him now, and her eyes weren't empty anymore. They were burning. "Be quiet," she whispered, her British Jamaican accent thick with urgency. Her fingers dug into his wrist with surprising strength, pulling him back toward the shadows of the garden. "Please, you can't go in there. Not yet." Sang-jae didn't take orders. Not from his wife, not from the elders, not from God himself. But something in Deborah's voice, something raw and desperate, made him hesitate. And in that single moment of hesitation, he heard it. A voice drifting from the cracked bedroom window. Male, smug, horribly familiar. "We'll tell him tomorrow," the voice said. "About the pregnancy. About us. He'll have no choice but to grant the divorce, and then the estate is split 50-50. Unless he refuses. Unless he fights." Ji-hoon's voice. His childhood friend. His brother in everything but blood. The man he trusted with his life, with his business, with his secrets. So-yeon laughed, breathy and cruel. "Then we use Plan B. The lawyer said the insurance policy updates January 1st. If he dies before he signs the divorce papers, I inherit everything. No split, no lawyers, no mess." Sang-jae felt the earth tilt beneath his feet. But Deborah's hand was still on his wrist, still pulling him backward, away from the house, away from the gun at his hip and the violence screaming in his blood. Her palm was warm against his pulse, and she was shaking so hard he could feel it in his bones. He let her pull him into the darkness. Because something in her fear felt like the only honest thing in his entire world. Hello, lovers of the ruthless and the real. Welcome back to Ruthless Romance Tales, where we don't do fairy tales, we do the kind of love that leaves scars. Before we dive into tonight's storm, I want to say thank you. Thank you for trusting me with your time, your hearts, and your late nights. This story is different. This one is going to hurt in the best way, and I promise you, you've never seen an ending like this before. So buckle up, because Lee Sang-jae and Deborah Horton are about to take you somewhere dark, somewhere beautiful, and somewhere you won't want to leave. Hit that like button like your life depends on it. Subscribe because you're already hooked, and smash that notification bell, because missing what comes next would be a crime. Now let's begin. Deborah's hand didn't let go until they were deep in the garden, hidden behind the stone fountain that hadn't run water since Sang-jae's father died. The December air bit at their skin, but she didn't seem to notice. Her chest was heaving, her breath coming out in short, visible puffs, and Sang-jae realized she wasn't just afraid, she was furious. "Talk," he said, his voice low and lethal. "And this better be the truth, or you're going to regret pulling me away from that bedroom." Deborah's dark eyes met his without flinching, her full lips pressed into a thin line, and even in the shadows, he could see the way her jaw clenched with determination. Her braids were pulled back tight under her white cap, but a few loose strands framed her face, softening the steel in her expression. "I know you don't have any reason to trust me," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I'm just the maid, just another face you pass in the hallway, but I need you to listen to me right now, because what I'm about to tell you will save your life." Sang-jae's eyes narrowed. He was a man who trafficked in secrets, who read lies in the twitch of an eyebrow, the shift of a shoulder. But Deborah wasn't lying. He could feel it. "You have 30 seconds, he said. She took a breath, and he watched the way her collarbone rose and fell beneath the crisp white collar of her uniform. 2 weeks ago, I was cleaning the study upstairs. The one your wife thinks is always locked. I found a key in the back of the linen closet, and I shouldn't have used it, but I did." She paused, her eyes searching his face for judgment. He gave her none. "Go on. I heard them talking through the air vent. Your wife and Ji-hoon. They didn't know I was there. They never know I'm anywhere." Deborah's voice cracked, just slightly, and Sang-jae saw the flash of pain cross her face before she buried it. "They were talking about killing you, not the affair, not the divorce, murder, and they've been planning it for months." Sang-jae felt his blood turn to ice, but his face remained stone. "Prove it." Deborah reached into the pocket of her uniform and pulled out a small digital recorder, the cheap kind you'd buy at a drugstore. It looked absurd in her trembling fingers, like a weapon disguised as a toy. "I've been recording every conversation I could for the past 2 weeks. Every time they thought they were alone. Every time they forgot I existed." She held it out to him, her dark brown eyes locked on his. "This is everything. The insurance fraud, the fake pregnancy, the poison they're planning to use on New Year's Eve." She swallowed hard, her throat working against the words. "And the fact that Ji-hoon has been sleeping with your wife since last winter." Sang-jae stared at the recorder. His world was collapsing, but his hands were steady as he took it from her. His fingers brushed hers, and the contact sent a jolt through him that had nothing to do with the cold or the rage or the betrayal burning in his chest. "Why?" His voice was barely audible. "Why would you risk this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Deborah looked at him, and for the first time since she'd grabbed his wrist, he saw the vulnerability beneath the fury. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. "Because 4 months ago," she whispered, "I was standing in the kitchen at 2 a.m, crying so hard I thought I'd break. I'd just gotten off the phone with my sister back in London. She told me our mum had died, and I couldn't afford the flight home for the funeral. I couldn't even afford to take a day off to grieve." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "And you walked in. You didn't say anything at first. You just stood there in your suit, looking at me like you didn't know what to do with a crying woman in your kitchen. But then you asked me what was wrong. Not as my employer, as a person." Sang-jae remembered that night. He'd come home late from a meeting, exhausted and blood-stained in ways that didn't show. He'd found her in the kitchen, shoulders shaking, trying to muffle her sobs with a dish towel. He'd stood there, awkward and useless, until he finally asked her what hurt. "And you gave me $5,000, Deborah continued, her voice breaking now. "You said it was an advance on my salary, but we both knew it wasn't. You paid for my flight, my hotel, everything. You told me to take as much time as I needed. And when I came back, you never mentioned it again. Never held it over me. Never made me feel like I owed you." A single tear slipped down her cheek, catching the moonlight. "You treated me like I mattered, and I've been watching them plan to take that away from the world. So no, I don't owe you anything. But I refuse to stand by and let them kill the only man in this house who saw me as human." The words hung between them like a vow. Sang-jae felt something crack open in his chest, something he thought he'd buried years ago beneath blood and business and the weight of his father's legacy. He looked at Deborah, really looked at her, and saw the woman who'd been invisible by design. The sharp intelligence in her eyes, the quiet strength in the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself like she was ready to fight even though she was terrified. "Play it," he said quietly. So she did. And as Ji-hoon's voice filled the frozen garden, laughing about the poison, about the insurance money, about how easy it would be to make Sang-jae's death look like a heart attack, Deborah watched his face. She watched the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands curled into fists, the way his eyes went cold and empty, like all the warmth had been drained from his soul. But he didn't explode. He didn't rage. He just listened. And when the recording ended, when the garden fell silent again except for the sound of their breathing, he looked at her and said the last thing she expected. "Thank you." Then he handed the recorder back to her, his fingers lingering against hers for just a moment too long. "Now," he said, his voice soft and dangerous, "you're going to tell me everything you know, every detail, every conversation, every plan, and then we're going to destroy them both." 2 weeks ago, Deborah Horton made a mistake that would save a man's life. She found the key in the back of the linen closet on the 3rd floor, tucked behind a stack of Egyptian cotton sheets that Soyeon never used because they weren't soft enough. It was small, brass, old-fashioned, the kind of key that opened the kind of doors people wanted to stay closed. Deborah knew she shouldn't use it. 6 months of working in the Lee household had taught her the cardinal rule: see nothing, hear nothing, speak nothing. Invisible was safe. Invisible paid the bills. Invisible kept her visa valid and her sister's university tuition covered back in London. But Deborah had never been good at following rules that didn't make sense. The study door opened without a sound, and the room beyond stole her breath. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, packed with leather-bound volumes in Korean, English, and languages she didn't recognize. A massive desk dominated the center, its surface empty except for a single lamp and a framed photograph. Sang-jae and another man, younger, laughing with their arms around each other's shoulders. Brothers in everything but blood. Ji-hoon. Deborah had seen him around the estate a dozen times. Always impeccably dressed, always smiling, always whispering things to Soyeon that made her laugh in that particular way that set Deborah's teeth on edge. She moved through the study quickly, dusting the shelves, the desk, the windowsill. She was reaching for the lamp when she heard it. Voices, drifting up through the air vent in the floor. Female and male, close, intimate. Deborah froze. The lawyer says we need to wait until after January 1st. Soyeon's voice said, crisp and businesslike. The insurance policy updates automatically. Double indemnity. 50 million if he dies in an accident. Deborah's heart stopped. And you're sure about the poison? Ji-hoon's voice this time uncertain. Your husband isn't stupid, Soyeon. He survived 3 assassination attempts from the Park Syndicate. What makes you think he won't see this coming? Soyeon laughed, and the sound was like glass shattering. Because he trusts me. He doesn't love me anymore. Hasn't touched me in over a year, but he trusts me, and that's all we need. Deborah's hands started shaking. The duster fell from her fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a soft thud that sounded like thunder in the silence. The voices below stopped. Did you hear that? Soyeon asked. Ji-hoon's response was muffled, but Deborah didn't wait to hear it. She grabbed the duster, backed out of the study, locked the door, and disappeared down the servants' staircase like smoke. Her heart didn't stop pounding until she was back in her room in the staff quarters, sitting on her narrow bed with her back against the wall. Her phone was in her hand before she realized she'd picked it up. She pulled up the browser, typed 3 words into the search bar. What to do, witness murder plot. The results were useless. Call the police, contact a lawyer, tell someone you trust. Deborah laughed, a bitter sound that hurt her throat. The police? In a house owned by a man who had half the precinct on his payroll? A lawyer? With what money? Tell someone she trusted? She'd been in America for 8 months, and the only person who'd shown her an ounce of genuine kindness was the man they were planning to kill. She sat there for 3 hours, staring at the wall, weighing her options. By dawn, she'd made her decision. She couldn't go to the authorities. She couldn't leave. She couldn't pretend she hadn't heard. So she'd do the only thing left. She'd gather evidence. Real evidence. The kind that couldn't be denied or explained away. The next morning, Deborah walked into a small electronics shop in the city and bought a digital voice recorder with the last of her savings. She told the clerk it was for recording lectures. He smiled and wished her luck with her studies. Deborah smiled back and thought about poison and insurance policies, and the way Sang-jae had looked at her that night in the kitchen, like her pain actually mattered. 2 weeks, she told herself. 2 weeks to get enough evidence to prove what they were planning. Then she'd decide who to tell. She just didn't expect Sang-jae to come home early and force her hand. Sang-jae didn't go back into the house that night. Instead, he drove Deborah to a place she never expected. A 24-hour diner on the edge of the city, where the coffee was burnt and the waitress didn't look twice at a Mafia boss and his maid sitting in a corner booth at 2 a.m. Play it again, he said. Deborah pressed play on the recorder for the 4th time. She watched his face as Ji-hoon's voice filled the space between them, talking about dosages and timing and how the toxin would mimic a heart attack so perfectly that no autopsy would catch it. Sang-jae's expression never changed. He sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, eyes fixed on the recorder like it was a bomb he was trying to defuse. But Deborah noticed the small things. The way his jaw tightened when Soyeon laughed. The way his fingernails went white when Ji-hoon said his name with such casual contempt. The way his breathing slowed, became controlled. Like he was physically restraining himself from violence. When the recording ended, he reached across the table and turned it off. How many recordings do you have? He asked quietly. 7, Deborah said. Different conversations, different rooms, all saying the same thing. They want you dead, and they've planned it down to the minute. Sang-jae nodded slowly. His eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time since she'd grabbed his wrist in the garden, she saw something other than rage in them. She saw exhaustion. Deep, bone-tired exhaustion. "Why didn't you go to the police?" he asked. Deborah almost laughed. "With respect, sir, half the police in Westchester are on your payroll. The other half wouldn't believe a foreign maid accusing a respected socialite and her business partner of conspiracy to commit murder. I'd be deported before I finished giving my statement." "Smart," Sang-jae said. Then his eyes sharpened. "So what did you think you were going to do with these recordings?" Deborah hesitated. The truth was, she hadn't known. She'd been gathering evidence on instinct, on the desperate hope that somehow, when the moment came, she'd figure out how to use it. "I was going to give them to you," she said finally. "Tonight was supposed to be the night. I was going to slip the recorder into your office with a note, but then you came home early, and I panicked, and grabbed my wrist instead of letting me walk in there and shoot them both." "Yes." Sang-jae studied her for a long moment. The diner was nearly empty. Just them and a drunk in the corner booth and the tired waitress refilling coffee that no one was drinking. Outside, snow had started falling again, thick and heavy, turning the world white. "You saved my life tonight," he said quietly. Deborah shook her head. "I just stopped you from walking into a trap. They would have claimed self-defense. You, the violent gangster, catching your wife with another man, and flying into a rage. Ji-hoon would have been the hero who tried to protect her. The police would have found the planted evidence in your office, the financial records they've been doctoring for months. You'd be dead or in prison, and they'd have everything." Sang-jae's eyes widened slightly. "How do you know about planted evidence?" "Because I clean your office," Deborah said. "And 3 days ago, I noticed files that weren't there before, financial documents with your signature. But the ink was too fresh, the paper too crisp. I didn't understand what they meant until I heard them talking about framing you for embezzlement." Sang-jae leaned back in the booth, and for the first time that night, he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who just realized his prey had made a fatal mistake. "You're wasted as a maid," he said. Deborah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm a graduate student, actually. Or I was. Before my visa situation got complicated." "What did you study?" "Forensic accounting." Sang-jae's smile widened. "Of course you did." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "Here's what's going to happen, Deborah Horton. You're going to help me destroy them. Not with bullets. Not with violence. With evidence so airtight that when I'm done, they'll beg for prison just to escape what I have planned." Deborah's heart hammered in her chest. "And what do I get out of this?" Sang-jae's expression softened, just slightly. "Your visa. Fully legal. Fully permanent. A job if you want it. And my word that you'll never be invisible again." Deborah looked at the man across from her. The man who'd paid for her mother's funeral. The man whose wife wanted him dead. The man who was offering her everything she needed in exchange for helping him commit calculated revenge. She should have been afraid. She should have run. Instead, she held out her hand. "Deal." They went back to the estate at dawn. Sang-jae parked 3 blocks away and they walked through the service entrance like ghosts. Deborah still in her uniform, Sang-jae in the same clothes he'd worn to Manhattan. To anyone watching, he was just coming home from his business trip. She was just the maid starting her morning shift. No one could know they'd spent the night planning a war. "Your wife will expect you to act normal," Deborah whispered as they stood in the kitchen. She was making coffee with hands that had finally stopped shaking. "Can you do that?" Sang-jae leaned against the counter, watching her move. "I've been pretending my marriage wasn't dead for 2 years. I can pretend for 2 more weeks." 2 weeks? New Year's Eve. That's when they're planning to kill me at the annual gala, which means we have 13 days to build a case, secure the evidence, and make sure that when they try to poison me, the only thing they'll be drinking is their own destruction. Deborah poured coffee into 2 cups, her mind already racing through logistics. "We need to access your wife's computer. Her phone, bank records, everything. Already done." Sang-jae pulled out his own phone and showed her a screen filled with folders. "I have access to everything in this house. Security cameras, digital files, even the messages she thinks she deleted." Deborah stared at him. "Then why do you need me?" "Because I need someone I can trust." His voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. "Everyone in my world has an angle, Deborah. Everyone wants something. My accountants skim off the top. My lawyers play both sides. My own brother," he spat the word like poison, has been sleeping with my wife for a year. But you could have sold those recordings to my enemies for $500,000. You could have used them to blackmail me. Instead, you gave them to me for free. I told you why. I know." He stepped closer, and Deborah felt the air between them shift, grow heavy with something she didn't want to name. "And that's exactly why I trust you." The kitchen door swung open. They both turned to find Soyeon standing in the doorway, immaculate in a silk robe, her hair perfect despite the early hour. Her eyes moved from Sungjae to Deborah and back again, sharp and assessing. "You're home early," she said to her husband, her voice sweet as arsenic. "I thought you'd be in Manhattan until tonight." Sangjae's expression didn't flicker. "Deal fell through. I came back to regroup." Soyeon's smile was practiced, flawless. "Well, I'm glad you're home. We need to discuss the seating arrangements for the gala." She turned to Deborah, and her voice turned cold. "Why are you standing around? The linens need changing in the guest wing." "Yes, ma'am," Deborah said quietly, lowering her eyes in that practiced gesture of subservience she'd perfected over 6 months. She moved to leave, but Soyeon's voice stopped her. "Actually, Deborah, I've been meaning to talk to you." She stepped further into the kitchen, her silk robe whispering against the tile. "I'm thinking of hiring additional staff for the gala, which means your hours will be reduced after New Year's. Significantly reduced." Deborah's blood ran cold. She understood the subtext perfectly. After New Year's, after Sangjae was dead, Soyeon would fire her. The only witness to her comings and goings, the invisible maid who saw too much, would be eliminated. Not with poison, but with deportation. "I understand, ma'am," Deborah said. "Good." Soyeon smiled. "It's nothing personal, just budgetary concerns." Sangjae set his coffee cup down with a sharp click. "Actually, I've been thinking of promoting Deborah." Both women turned to stare at him. Soyeon's smile froze. "Excuse me? We need someone to manage the household accounts. Someone detail-oriented. Someone I can trust." Sangjae's eyes met Deborah's, and she saw the challenge there, the test. Deborah has a background in accounting. She'd be perfect. The silence in the kitchen was suffocating. Soyeon's face remained perfectly composed, but Deborah saw the rage flicker behind her eyes like lightning before a storm. "That's very generous of you, darling, but I really don't think a maid is qualified to." "She's not a maid anymore," Sangjae interrupted. "As of today, she's my personal financial assistant, and she'll be attending the gala as part of my staff." Deborah's heart stopped. Soyeon's smile turned to ice, and in that moment Deborah realized something that made her blood freeze in her veins. Sangjae hadn't just hired her to help him build a case. He'd just painted a target on her back. Deborah lasted exactly 4 hours before she cornered Sangjae in his office. "What the hell were you thinking?" She didn't bother knocking, just slammed the door behind her hard enough to rattle the frame. "You just told your wife, the woman planning to murder you, that I'm suddenly important to you. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Sangjae looked up from his laptop, his expression maddeningly calm. "I elevated you from servant to staff, made you visible. You made me a liability." Deborah's voice shook with fury. "She's going to kill me now, before the gala, before you. She has to, because I'm a loose end." "Exactly." The single word stopped Deborah cold. "What?" Sangjae closed his laptop and stood, moving around the desk with that predatory grace she was beginning to recognize. "Think, Deborah. If Soyeon wants you dead, what does she have to do?" Deborah's mind raced, her accounting training kicking in despite her panic. She'd have to act fast, change the plan, make mistakes. "And when people rush," Sangjae continued, moving closer, "they get sloppy. They leave evidence. They expose their accomplices." He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of his soap. Something clean and understated. "I didn't make you a target, Deborah. I made you bait." The words hit her like a slap. "You used me. I'm using everyone." His voice was cold now, empty of the warmth he'd shown her in the diner. "This is what I do. I identify assets and I deploy them. You wanted to help me destroy them? Congratulations. You're helping." Deborah stared at him, feeling something crack inside her chest. The man who'd paid for her mother's funeral suddenly looked like exactly what he was. A criminal who'd built an empire on manipulation and violence. She'd been so focused on saving him that she'd forgotten the most important rule. Monsters don't stop being monsters just because they're kind to you once. "I want out," she said quietly. "No." The word was absolute. "Final." "You don't get to decide that," Deborah said, her voice rising. Actually, I do. Sang-jae's eyes were black and empty. You involved yourself the moment you started recording my wife. You think you can just walk away now? Go back to London and pretend you never heard anything? His laugh was bitter. You're naive, Deborah, but you're not stupid. You know too much. Which means you're either with me, or you're a problem I need to solve. The threat hung in the air between them, ugly and undeniable. Deborah felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I trusted you. That was your first mistake. The office door opened without warning. Ji-hoon stood in the doorway, his expression pleasant and utterly empty of warmth. His eyes moved from Sang-jae to Deborah, lingering on the small space between them, the tension crackling like electricity. Am I interrupting? He asked smoothly. No, Sang-jae said, his voice returning to that practiced neutrality. Deborah was just leaving. We were discussing her new responsibilities. Ji-hoon's smile widened. Ah, yes, the promotion, So-yeon told me. Very unexpected. He stepped into the office, and Deborah felt the walls close in. I didn't realize we were hiring from the cleaning staff. Deborah has skills I need, Sang-jae said. I'm sure she does. Ji-hoon's eyes crawled over Deborah in a way that made her skin feel contaminated. Though I have to wonder what other skills she might be offering to earn such a rapid promotion. The implication was clear, disgusting. Sang-jae's jaw tightened. Watch yourself. I'm just curious, brother. Ji-hoon moved closer to Deborah, invading her space with deliberate intimidation. After all, you've been so distant from So-yeon lately. A man has needs. And she is quite pretty. For the help. Deborah's hand moved before her brain caught up. The slap echoed through the office like a gunshot. Ji-hoon's head snapped to the side. When he looked back at her, his eyes were filled with something dark and promising violence. You just made a very serious mistake, he said softly. No, Deborah said, her voice steady despite the terror flooding her veins. You did, by assuming I'd stay quiet while you insult me. Ji-hoon smiled, touching his reddening cheek. Spirit, I like that. He glanced at Sang-jae. You should train your pets better, brother. Before someone puts them down. He left, closing the door with ominous gentleness. Deborah turned to Sang-jae, expecting anger, expecting consequences. Instead, he was smiling. What? She demanded. He's going to try to kill you now, Sang-jae said. Tonight, probably. Which means we finally get to see who's really pulling the strings. Deborah didn't sleep that night. She sat in her small room in the staff quarters with the lights off and a kitchen knife under her pillow, listening to every creak of the old house settling, every footstep in the hallway outside her door. At 3 a.m, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Roof garden. Now. Come alone. Her first instinct was to ignore it. Her second was to call Sang-jae. Her third, the one she followed, was to slip on her shoes and go, because sitting in this room waiting to die was worse than walking toward whatever was waiting for her. The roof garden was So-yeon's domain, a carefully manicured paradise of winter plants and heated glass enclosures that probably cost more than Deborah would earn in a lifetime. She pushed open the access door and stepped into the cold December air. So-yeon was standing at the edge of the garden, looking out over the estate grounds. She didn't turn when Deborah approached. Do you know what my husband's greatest weakness is? So-yeon asked conversationally. Deborah stayed silent. He thinks everyone operates on the same moral code he does. Loyalty, honor, protection of the weak. So-yeon finally turned, and her beautiful face was carved from ice. He thinks that makes him strong, but it just makes him predictable. Why am I here? Deborah asked. Because you're about to make a choice. So-yeon stepped closer, and Deborah fought the urge to back away. My husband promoted you today, made you visible, important. Do you know why? To provoke you. Smart girl. So-yeon smiled. He's using you as bait to force me into making a mistake, which means you're expendable to him, a tool, nothing more. And what am I to you? So-yeon tilted her head, considering. That depends on what you choose right now. Option 1. You continue helping my husband, and Ji-hoon makes sure you have a very unfortunate accident before the week is out. Option 2. You help me instead, and I make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. Deborah's heart hammered. You want me to spy on him. I want you to do exactly what you've been doing. Gather evidence, record conversations, but this time, you bring everything to me first. So-yeon's eyes glittered. I know my husband has access to my computer, my phone, but he doesn't have access to yours. You could be feeding him false information while giving me the truth. And when this is over, when he's dead and I have everything, I'll give you $2 million and a first-class ticket anywhere in the world you want to go. $2 million. Deborah's entire body went numb. That was more money than she'd see in 10 lifetimes of scrubbing floors and changing linens. Why would you trust me? Deborah asked carefully. Because you're smart enough to know which side is winning. So-yeon stepped even closer, and Deborah could smell her perfume, something floral and suffocating. My husband is a dying empire, Deborah. He's been trying to go legitimate for 3 years, and it's bleeding him dry. His enemies smell weakness. His allies are abandoning him. In 6 months, with or without my help, he'll be dead or in prison. I'm just accelerating the inevitable. And Ji-hoon will be dealt with after. So-yeon's smile was sharp as a blade. Did you really think I'd let him live? He's useful now. But men like him don't share power. Once I have the estate, the accounts, the empire, Ji-hoon becomes another unfortunate accident. Deborah's mind spun. This was the 4th plot twist in less than 24 hours, and she was losing track of who was betraying whom. I need time to think, Deborah said. You have until tomorrow night. So-yeon turned back to the view. After that, I'll assume you've chosen my husband, and I'll handle you accordingly. Deborah walked back to her room on shaking legs. She locked the door, sat on her bed, and pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. She didn't call Sang-jae. Instead, she opened her banking app and stared at the balance. $342. Everything she had left in the world after 6 months of saving every penny. $2 million. She thought about her sister's university tuition, about the flat in London she'd never be able to afford, about the fact that Sang-jae had called her an asset to be deployed, had used her as bait without asking, had threatened her when she wanted to leave. He'd been kind to her once. Once. That didn't make him a good man. It just made him a monster with one moment of humanity. Deborah closed her eyes and made a decision that would damn them all. Deborah went to Sang-jae's office at dawn and told him everything. She watched his face as she recounted the rooftop meeting, So-yeon's offer, the $2 million, the revelation that So-yeon planned to kill Ji-hoon after killing him. She watched for anger, for betrayal, for some flicker of the cold threat he'd shown her yesterday. Instead, he laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It was genuine, almost relieved, and it confused her more than anything else he'd done. She offered you $2 million, he said, leaning back in his chair. That's actually more than I expected. She must be desperate. You're not angry I didn't immediately refuse? Why would I be angry? Sang-jae stood and moved to the window, looking out over the estate grounds where the sun was just beginning to burn through the December fog. You came to me instead of taking her deal. That tells me everything I need to know. Maybe I'm playing both sides, Deborah said quietly. Maybe I'm telling you this to earn your trust while planning to betray you later. Are you? No. Then we're fine. He turned back to her, and his expression was softer than she'd seen since the diner. I owe you an apology for yesterday. The bait comment. The threats. That was fear talking. Deborah blinked. I'm sorry, what? Fear. Sang-jae moved closer, and she saw something raw in his eyes. For the first time in my life, I have something I actually care about losing. Not money, not power, not even my life. You, and that terrified me, so I tried to push you away by making you hate me. The words hit her like a physical blow. You barely know me. I know you risked everything to save a man you had no reason to save. I know you have a sister you'd die for, a mother you couldn't bury properly, and a degree you couldn't finish because the world is cruel to people like us. Sang-jae's voice was quiet, intense. I know you slapped Ji-hoon yesterday when any sane person would have stayed silent. And I know that when So-yeon offered you more money than you'll ever see again, you chose me anyway. I chose survival, Deborah whispered. Not you. Same thing. He smiled, sad and knowing. In my world, they always are. The moment hung between them, charged with something Deborah didn't want to acknowledge, something that felt dangerous and inevitable and completely insane, given that his wife was planning to murder him in 9 days. What do I tell So-yeon? She asked, forcing herself back to practical matters. Tell her yes. Deborah's stomach dropped. What? Tell her you'll spy for her. Feed her false information. Make her think she's winning. Sang-jae's eyes glittered with cold intelligence. Because here's what you don't know yet, Deborah. I've been 3 steps ahead of them since before you even found that key. What are you talking about? Sang-jae pulled out his phone and showed her a video file. Security footage from the study, dated 3 weeks ago. In it, So-yeon and Ji-hoon stood close together, whispering about poison and insurance policies and making it look like an accident. You already knew, Deborah breathed. I've known for 2 months. He pocketed the phone. I have cameras in every room of this house, Deborah. Hidden ones that even the security company doesn't know about. I've been recording everything, documenting everything, building a case so airtight that when I'm done, they won't just go to prison. They'll disappear into holes so deep their own mothers won't remember their names. Then why did you need me? Deborah's voice cracked. Why let me think I was saving you when you were never in danger? Because I needed someone on the inside they'd trust. Someone they'd try to flip. Sang Jae's expression was almost apologetic. And because I needed to know if you'd choose money or morality when the moment came. Most people choose money, Deborah, you didn't. That makes you rare. Deborah felt sick. So this was all a test. No. His hand reached out, hovering near her face but not quite touching. It started as a test, but somewhere between the diner and right now, it became something else entirely. What? The office door burst open. Ji-hoon stood there, face pale, phone clutched in his trembling hand. His eyes were wild, unfocused. "So-yeon's dead," he gasped. The words sucked all the air from the room. "What?" Sang Jae moved toward him. "What are you talking about?" Her car went off the bridge on Route 9, 20 minutes ago. Ji-hoon's voice broke. "They said she died on impact." The police came within the hour. 2 detectives, one older with silver hair and tired eyes, one younger with the eager sharpness of someone still trying to prove himself. They sat in the living room while Sang Jae answered questions with the perfect balance of shock and grief. Deborah watched from the doorway, invisible again in her uniform, and felt the world tilt sideways. So-yeon was dead. The woman who'd offered her $2 million less than 6 hours ago was now a corpse being pulled from the wreckage of her Mercedes. "Brake failure," the older detective said, his voice professionally sympathetic. "We'll know more after the full investigation, but preliminary assessment suggests mechanical failure. Sometimes these things happen, even with luxury vehicles." Sang Jae nodded slowly, his face a mask of devastated calm. "When can I see her?" "The morgue will contact you once they've completed the examination." The detective stood, offered his card. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Lee. We'll be in touch." After they left, Ji-hoon collapsed on the sofa, his head in his hands. His shoulders shook, and for a moment, Deborah almost believed his grief was real. Then she saw his reflection in the window. He was smiling. Sang Jae saw it too. His entire body went rigid. "Get out," Sang Jae said quietly. Ji-hoon looked up, and the mask of grief slipped back into place. "Brother, I know this is hard, but we need to talk about the business. With So-yeon gone, there are decisions." I said get out. Something in Sang Jae's voice made even Ji-hoon pause. He stood slowly, smoothing his suit. "Fine. We'll talk when you're thinking clearly." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Oh, and Sang Jae? You should know that So-yeon changed her will last week. Everything goes to me if you're implicated in her death. Just something to keep in mind." He left. Deborah waited until his car pulled away before she spoke. "He killed her." "Yes." Sang Jae's voice was hollow. "You knew he was going to." "No." Sang Jae turned to face her, and she saw something broken in his eyes. "I knew he was planning to kill me. I thought I had more time to stop him. I didn't realize he'd kill her first to isolate me." The funeral was 3 days later. A small private affair that the entire criminal underworld attended. Each syndicate sending representatives to pay respects to the wife of Lee Sang Jae. Deborah stood in the back, wearing a black dress that Sang Jae had bought her, and watched him accept condolences from men who would have killed him without hesitation if they sensed weakness. Ji-hoon was there too, playing the devastated friend, the grieving almost brother. His performance was flawless. After the service, Deborah found herself alone in the garden behind the funeral home. She was sitting on a bench, thinking about the woman who'd tried to recruit her and died before the game could play out, when someone sat down beside her. She turned to find an older man, distinguished in a dark suit, with the kind of face that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. "You're the maid," he said, not a question. Deborah bristled. "I'm Mr. Lee's assistant." The man smiled. "Of course. Forgive me." He pulled out a silver card case and handed her a card. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. My name is Agent Marcus Webb." Deborah's heart stopped. "Relax," he said. "I'm not here to arrest anyone. Yet." He looked out at the garden. "I'm here because So-yeon Lee contacted me 6 weeks ago." "What?" "She wanted to make a deal. Immunity in exchange for testimony against her husband and Park Ji-hoon." Webb's eyes were sharp, assessing. "She said they were planning to kill her and frame each other for insurance fraud." "That's not true," Deborah said before she could stop herself. I know, Webb's smile was grim. Because 3 weeks ago, she contacted me again and said she'd made it all up. Said she was angry at her husband and wanted revenge, but realized she was wrong. She apologized for wasting federal resources. Deborah's mind raced. Why are you telling me this? Because So-Yeon Lee died in a car accident the same week she was supposed to testify in a completely unrelated case. A money laundering investigation targeting Park Ji-hoon. Webb leaned closer. And because I've been watching Lee Sang-jae for 5 years, and I know he's trying to go legitimate. I know he's been distancing himself from the violence. And I know that if Ji-hoon inherits his empire, a lot of people are going to die. What do you want from me? Webb stood. I want you to tell Sang-jae that he has friends in places he didn't expect, and that if he wants to help us bring down Ji-hoon, we're listening. He handed her another card. This one has my personal number. 24 hours a day. He walked away, leaving Deborah alone with 2 business cards and the terrifying realization that the game was far more complicated than she'd understood. That night, she gave Sang-jae the cards and told him everything. He stared at them for a long time before speaking. Ji-hoon set her up. What? The FBI contact. The changed testimony. Ji-hoon fed So-yeon false information to make her look unstable. Then he killed her and made it look like an accident. Sang-jae's hands curled into fists. He's been planning this for months. Longer. And I was so focused on their affair and the poison plot that I didn't see the real game. What was the real game? Complete control. Sang-jae looked at Deborah with exhausted eyes. Ji-hoon didn't just want my empire. He wanted to destroy me first. Make me look guilty of So-yeon's death while he played the innocent victim. Then step in as the hero who holds everything together. Can you prove it? Not yet. But I have something Ji-hoon doesn't know about. What? You. Sang-jae led Deborah to a room she'd never seen before. Behind a false panel in his office was a steel door with a biometric lock. Inside was a space that looked like a cross between a server room and a war room. Screens lined the walls, displaying security feeds, financial data, encrypted communications. This is where I've been running my real operation for the past 3 years, he said, not the syndicate business, the exit strategy. Deborah stared at the screens. What am I looking at? Evidence. 3 years' worth. Every transaction, every conversation, every crime committed by every member of my organization. Sang-jae moved to a keyboard and pulled up files, including Ji-hoon. He doesn't know I've been documenting everything, building a case not just against him, but against the entire network. Why? Because I'm tired, Deborah. Sang-jae's voice cracked. I inherited this empire when I was 23 years old. My father died and left me a kingdom built on blood. And I've spent 15 years trying to figure out how to walk away from it without getting killed. This is how. I give the FBI everything. Everyone goes down except me, because I'm the one who delivered them. Witness protection, Deborah breathed. Better. Full immunity in exchange for dismantling the entire East Coast Syndicate network. Sang-jae pulled up another file. I've been negotiating with the FBI for 18 months. Agent Webb was my contact. But then So-yeon found out about some of the financial transfers, and she thought I was stealing from the organization. That's why she started planning to kill me. She thought I was betraying the syndicate for personal gain, not realizing I was trying to burn it all down. And Ji-hoon? Figured it out 3 months ago. Found one of my encrypted communications. Sang-jae's jaw tightened. He's been playing me ever since. The affair with So-yeon, the poison plot, all of it was designed to distract me, while he positioned himself to take over after I either died or went to prison. He used So-yeon as a pawn, fed her just enough truth to make her dangerous, then eliminated her when she became a liability. So he's not just a cheater and a murderer. Deborah felt sick. He's a mastermind. He learned from the best. Sang-jae's smile was bitter. I trained him, taught him everything I know, and now he's using it to destroy me. What's your plan? Sang-jae pulled up a new screen. This shows Ji-hoon's personal accounts. He's been siphoning money from the syndicate for 2 years, setting up his own network, preparing to break away. If I can prove he killed So-yeon and frame it as a hostile takeover attempt, the elders will turn on him. They don't tolerate internal warfare. It threatens everyone's profits. Can you prove he killed her? Not directly. But I have the next best thing. Sang-jae opened a video file. Security footage from a garage 3 blocks from the estate, dated the morning of So-yeon's death. In it, a figure in dark clothes approached So-yeon's car, spent 7 minutes underneath it, then left. The figure's face was hidden, but when he stood up, the body language was unmistakable. Ji-hoon. You had cameras following him. Deborah whispered. I've had cameras following everyone for 3 years. Sang-jae closed the file. But this footage alone isn't enough. A good lawyer would argue the figure could be anyone. We need more. We need Ji-hoon to confess. Or we need a witness who can testify to his intent. Where are you going to find that? Sang-jae turned to look at her. And Deborah felt ice slide down her spine. He's going to come after you next, Sang-jae said quietly. You're the last loose end. The only person besides me who knows about the recordings, the plots, everything. He has to eliminate you before he makes his final move. You want to use me as bait. Again, I want to give you a wire and let him incriminate himself. Sang-jae stepped closer. I know I've asked too much of you already. I know you have every reason to walk away. But Deborah, if Ji-hoon wins, he becomes the next generation of everything I've been trying to end. More violence, more death, more people like you getting caught in the crossfire. And if I say no, then I'll find another way. It'll take longer, and more people might die. But I'll find another way. His eyes were steady, honest. I won't force you into this. You've already saved my life once. I have no right to ask you to risk it again. Deborah thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Invisible. Safe. Poor but clean. She thought about the $2 million she'd turned down because something in her still believed in doing the right thing. She thought about the man in front of her, who'd killed no one but was trying to bring down an empire from the inside, who'd paid for her mother's funeral, who was offering her a choice instead of an order. What do I have to do? She asked. Sang-jae exhaled, relief and regret mixing in his expression. Wear the wire. Let Ji-hoon approach you. He'll threaten you, try to recruit you, or try to kill you. Any of those options give us what we need. And you'll be listening the whole time? Every second. The moment you're in danger, I pull you out. Deborah nodded slowly. When? Tomorrow night. There's a memorial dinner at the estate. Private. Just the inner circle. Ji-hoon will make his move then, when he thinks he has privacy and control. What makes you so sure? Because that's what I would do. Sang-jae's smile was grim, and I taught him everything. The next evening, Deborah stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the tiny microphone hidden in her necklace. Her hands were shaking. The black dress Sang-jae had given her for the funeral felt like armor now, like war paint. There was a soft knock on her door. Come in, she called. Sang-jae entered, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. He was in a dark suit, looking every inch the dangerous man he was born to be, but his eyes were soft when they met hers. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do. Why? Because you were right. If I walk away now, more people die, and I've already chosen what side I'm on. Deborah touched the necklace. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't get yourself killed before you finish what you started. Sang-jae crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was sudden, desperate, and Deborah felt something break open in her chest. She wrapped her arms around him and held on. This man who was trying to destroy his own empire to build something better. If anything goes wrong, he whispered against her hair. If you feel unsafe for even a second, you say the word London and I come get you. Understand? Understood. He pulled back, his hands on her shoulders. And Deborah, after tonight, after all of this is over, I want you to know that you're the bravest person I've ever met. She smiled, sad and fierce. Tell me that when we survive. They went downstairs together, where the memorial dinner was already underway. 20 people, all inner circle, all dangerous. Ji-hoon was holding court at one end of the room, playing the gracious host in Sang-jae's own home. When he saw Deborah enter on Sang-jae's arm, his smile faltered for just a moment. Then it widened, sharp and predatory. Deborah, he called across the room. I was hoping to speak with you tonight. Would you join me in the study after dinner? There are some matters regarding Soyeon's estate that you might be able to help with. It was a trap wrapped in politeness. Of course, Deborah said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Sang-jae's hand tightened on her arm for just a moment. A silent message. I'm here. Dinner was an eternity. Deborah barely tasted the food, too focused on the weight of the microphone against her skin. The knowledge that in less than an hour, she'd be alone in a room with a murderer. When the meal finally ended, Ji-hoon caught her eye and nodded toward the study. Deborah stood, smoothed her dress, and walked toward her fate. Behind her, Sang-jae watched with his heart in his throat, listening through an earpiece to every breath she took. The study door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like a death sentence. Ji-hoon moved to the bar and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Deborah with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You've become quite important to Sang-jae," he said conversationally. "From invisible maid to trusted confidante in just a few weeks. That's impressive." Deborah took the glass but didn't drink. "He values loyalty, does he?" Ji-hoon settled into the leather chair behind the desk, the same chair Sang-jae usually occupied. The presumption was deliberate. Or does he value usefulness? There's a difference, you know? "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't play stupid, Deborah. It doesn't suit you." Ji-hoon's voice hardened. "You're an intelligent woman. Forensic accounting degree. Sharp eyes. You see things other people miss. So I know you've seen what's really happening in this house." Deborah's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "I've seen a man grieving his wife." Ji-hoon laughed, cold and mirthless. "Is that what you think this is? Grief?" He leaned forward. "Let me tell you what's really happening. Sang-jae has been planning to betray everyone in this organization for years. He's been building a case to hand us all over to the FBI so he can walk away clean. Did he tell you that?" Deborah's silence was answer enough. "I thought not." Ji-hoon stood and moved toward her, predatory and calm. "Your beloved employer, the man who paid for your mother's funeral, is a rat. He's going to destroy everyone who ever trusted him, everyone who built this empire with him, just so he can play at being legitimate. And you?" Deborah asked quietly. "What are you?" "A realist." Ji-hoon stopped inches from her. "I know what we are. I know what this world is. And I know that men like Sang-jae, who try to pretend they can walk away from blood, always end up drowning in it anyway." "Is that why you killed Soyeon?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Ji-hoon's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Calculation, assessment. Is that what he told you, that I killed her? You cut her brakes, made it look like an accident." Ji-hoon studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Clever. He's using you to get me to confess." He moved back to the bar, poured himself another drink. "Is he listening right now? Hidden microphone? Wire?" Deborah's blood turned to ice. "It's fine." Ji-hoon waved a hand dismissively. "I expected it. In fact, I'm counting on it." He raised his glass toward the walls, toward whatever cameras or microphones he assumed were there. "Hello, brother. Enjoying the show?" In his office, Sang-jae was already moving, but Ji-hoon's next words stopped him cold. "Yes, I killed Soyeon," Ji-hoon said calmly. "And yes, I've been planning to take over the organization. But here's what your beloved Sang-jae hasn't told you, Deborah. He knew I was going to kill her. In fact, he helped me." "That's a lie," Deborah whispered. "Is it?" Ji-hoon pulled out his phone and showed her a series of text messages, from Sang-jae's number to his. Discussing timing, discussing methods, discussing how to make it look like an accident, while leaving enough evidence to frame Ji-hoon later. Deborah stared at the messages, her mind reeling. They could be faked. They could be. But they're not. Ji-hoon pocketed the phone. "Your hero set me up to kill his wife so he could play the grieving husband while I played the villain. He gets sympathy, immunity, and a clear path to his new life. I get a murder charge. Very clever, really. I almost respect it." "No," Deborah said, but her voice wavered. "Ask yourself this, Deborah. How did Sang-jae know I'd kill her that specific morning? How did he have cameras in place to record it? How did he know exactly where to look?" Ji-hoon moved closer, his voice soft and poisonous. "Because he told me to do it. He gave me the tools, the timing, everything. Then he documented it so he could use it against me later. Why would he do that? Because I'm the only one who knows about his FBI deal. I'm the only one who can prove he's a traitor to the organization. If I'm in prison for murder, my testimony is worthless." Ji-hoon smiled. "We were partners in this, Deborah. Right up until the moment he decided to betray me too." In his office, Sang-jae's hands were shaking as he listened, because every word Ji-hoon said was carefully constructed to sound plausible, to plant doubt, to destroy the trust he'd built with Deborah. And the worst part was, there was a grain of truth in it. "You're lying," Deborah said, but she sounded less certain. "Am I? Then ask him. Ask him if he knew I was going to kill Soyeon. Ask him if he could have stopped me and didn't." Ji-hoon leaned in close enough that she could smell his cologne. "Ask him if he's willing to sacrifice anyone, including you, to get what he wants." Deborah's hand moved to her necklace, to the microphone hidden there. The word London was on her lips. But then Ji-hoon made his fatal mistake. "Of course, none of this matters," he said, straightening. "Because you're going to die tonight anyway, just like Soyeon, just like Sang-jae will tomorrow. Once the elders hear the evidence I've planted that he killed his own wife, you'll both be gone, and I'll be the last man standing." He pulled a knife from his jacket. Small, ceramic, undetectable by metal detectors. "Nothing personal," he said. "You're just a loose end." The door exploded inward. Sang-jae came through like a storm, and behind him were Agent Webb and 4 federal agents with guns drawn. "FBI, freeze!" Ji-hoon lunged for Deborah anyway, the knife flashing in the light. Sang-jae hit him like a freight train, slamming him into the bookshelf hard enough to crack wood. The knife clattered to the floor. They went down in a tangle of limbs and rage, and Deborah watched as Sang-jae, who'd been trying so hard to walk away from violence, unleashed 15 years of betrayal and fury on the man he'd once called brother. The agents pulled them apart. Ji-hoon was laughing, blood streaming from his nose. "You think this changes anything? You think they'll believe you over me? I'll tell them everything, Sang-jae. The FBI deal. The setup. How you manipulated me into killing her." "Go ahead," Sang-jae said quietly. Agent Webb held up a phone, showing a recording in progress. "Because we just got your full confession. Voluntary admission of murder, premeditated, with intent to commit additional murders." He smiled, cold and final. "You did this to yourself." Ji-hoon's face went white as the realization hit him. The whole dinner, the private conversation, it wasn't just about getting a confession. It was about getting him to reveal the truth in a way that couldn't be twisted or manipulated. "You set me up," Ji-hoon whispered. "No," Sang-jae said. "I gave you the opportunity to confess. You chose to threaten an innocent woman instead. There's a difference." As the agents dragged Ji-hoon away, still screaming threats and promises of revenge, Deborah stood frozen in the middle of the study. Sang-jae approached her carefully, like she might shatter. "The things he said?" she whispered. "About you knowing. About you helping him." "I knew he was planning something," Sang-jae admitted. "I had suspicions, but I didn't know it would be that morning, and I didn't give him tools or instructions. The messages he showed you were fabricated. I had my tech team verify it while you were in here." He paused. "But Deborah, I did have a choice. When I suspected what he might do, I could have warned Soyeon, and I didn't." "Why not?" "Because she would have warned him, and he would have disappeared, and more people would have died." Sang-jae's voice cracked. "I chose to sacrifice one person to save many. That's the calculation I made, and I'll live with that for the rest of my life." Deborah looked at him, this man who'd saved her and used her and tried to do the right thing in the most terrible way possible. "Are you a good man?" she asked. "No," he said simply. "But I'm trying to be better than I was." Agent Webb approached them, pocketing his phone. "We have enough to put Ji-hoon away for life, and with your testimony, Mr. Lee, we can dismantle the entire syndicate network. Your immunity deal stands. You're free." "What happens now?" Deborah asked. "Now," Webb said, "you both disappear for a while. Witness protection until the trials are over. New identities, new lives. After that, you're on your own." 6 months later, a woman named Maya Williams walked along the Vancouver harbor at sunset. She worked as a forensic accountant for a non-profit that helped immigrant communities navigate financial fraud. She had a small apartment with a view of the water. She had peace, most days. Her neighbor, David Park, ran a consulting firm that helped businesses transition from questionable practices to legitimate operations. He was quiet, kind, haunted by things he never spoke about. They'd been dancing around each other for months. Coffee in the hallway, dinners that felt like dates but were never called that. Conversations that skirted around the truth of who they'd been and what they'd done. One evening, as they sat on her balcony watching the sun set over the harbor, David finally spoke. "Do you think we deserve this?" he asked quietly. "This peace?" Maya thought about Soyeon, who died in a game she'd helped create. She thought about Ji-hoon, rotting in a federal prison. She thought about all the people who'd been hurt by the empire that David had built and she'd helped destroy. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I think we have to try to earn it." David's hand found hers, tentative and warm. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying." They sat in silence as the sun disappeared and the stars came out, 2 people who'd survived darkness trying to figure out how to live in the light. Back in New York, in a federal prison, Ji-hoon sat in his cell and stared at the wall. He'd lost everything. His freedom, his empire, his brother. But late at night, when the guards changed shifts and the prison fell quiet, he smiled. Because men like him always had contingency plans, and this game was far from over. Beautiful souls, Here's what I want you to understand about this story. Love isn't always about choosing the good person. Sometimes it's about choosing to become better people together. Deborah and Sanjay aren't perfect. They're scarred, they're complicated, and they're carrying weight that will never fully lift. But they chose each other anyway. Not because it was easy, but because sometimes the person who understands your darkness is the only one who can help you find your light. So tell me in the comments, do you believe in second chances for people who've done terrible things for complicated reasons? Can someone who's lived in darkness ever truly find redemption? And would you have made the same choice Deborah did? Or would you have walked away? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories that make you question everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and the price of redemption. And remember, my loves, we're all just trying to survive our own stories. Some of us just have darker chapters than others. Until next time, stay ruthless, stay real, and never forget that the most dangerous thing you can do is love someone who's still learning how to be human. I'll see you in the next tale.